have such a great, robust conversation to be had today. So thank you everyone who's here and joining our conversation on emerging trends for 2025 in the impact communications field. I'm Jen Shapiro. I am one of your co-moderators today, along with Brandon Wilson. We're so happy to be here. We are both board members of the Impact Communications Institute, and we're joined by Erin Powers, who we're going to give a proper introduction to in just a minute. In the meantime, we'd love to hear where everyone is from, where everyone's joining us from. If you don't mind, let's get this chat started. I'm a big chat person, so drop your name and your location into the chat, just so we know who's connecting and maybe there's a chance to make a connection here. Just want to, of course, as always, note that we are joining each other from all different unceded Indigenous lands. I am working from New Jersey and in the New York City area, which we know is the homeland of the Lenape people. And Brandon lives and works in Greater Birmingham, Alabama, which is the homeland of the Muskogee Creek and Shawnee people. So want to take a moment to acknowledge that. And we're so excited to dig into 2025. I personally cannot believe we are here in the middle/end of November, heading into 2025 planning and thinking about January. This year has flown by for me. And so today we're going to talk about what these topics and themes are for marketers, how we want to track them or maybe not track them in some cases, and talk about what we should be thinking. I hope that this conversation really brings people a way to think about next year, especially for marketers, what you should be bringing in terms of planning and thought leadership to your teams, trends that you may want to go deeper on. And I'll just plug right now, we are covering some of these trends in our agenda, which is our monthly newsletter that goes out. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, and there's always great information. So I'm going to hand it over to Brandon to talk us through some of the community guidelines that we have for our councils, just housekeeping, and then we'll get started.
Thanks so much, Jen. I'll introduce, our fellow panelists properly and momentarily, but let's begin with a few community guidelines, like things that we just need to be mindful of. It's a lot of people from all around the world, so we want to keep your camera, your microphones on mute. We ask everyone to respect other people's opinions. If opportunities arise, please remember to critique the idea, not the person. And critique is good, but respect is better. We also invite participation. So we've planned time for a Q&A, and so there will be an opportunity for a lot of questions and answers. And also note that the session is being recorded. So just be mindful of that. It'll be shared later on our YouTube channel. But let me tell you a little bit about Impact Communications Institute. If you are joining for the first time today, welcome. These sessions are incredibly insightful. They're very, very helpful. And Impact Communications Institute is a registered nonprofit organization, and we're on a mission to give tools that drive positive change, but also that furthers impact relations for our generation, but also generations to come. And so we're really excited that you are here. We will invite you to join or to learn more about our Impact Communications Institute by going to impactcommsinstitute.org, impactcommsinstitute.org. So we look forward to you learning more. We're available via email if you have any questions. But more than anything, and greater than the ground rules, is a big welcome. I hope this is going to be a great additive to your Friday.
So excited.
Jen?
Do you want to introduce Erin?
Well, yeah, I'm delighted to introduce Erin. So Erin is a partner of strategy at SYLVAIN, and Erin Powers is a partner. He's a strategist. He's an all-around 100A1 human being. His background spans full life cycle of business transformation, brand strategy, graphic design, advertising. To put it short, if there is a human example of a Swiss Army knife in external affairs, he'd be it. He specializes in bringing consumer-facing brands full circle, bringing them to life. He's guided the evolution of diversity slate of key clients that include, get ready, Google, Spotify, Netflix, General Motors, my favorite, Anheuser-Busch and Bell. I'm from Alabama. We love our beer. American Express and others. Aaron is also the host of SYLVAIN weekly podcast called Critical Nonsense. You'll learn a whole lot more about him as we go through our conversation. We'll keep it free flowing, we'll keep it entertaining, and we'll keep it informative. So it gives us great pleasure to introduce to you all our good friend Aaron Powers.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much. It is wonderful to be here. I am so excited to have this conversation. So I'll keep it quiet until we start to get into it.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to go when y'all are.
Well, let's get into it. Obviously, this council was billed as a 2025 look ahead, but we should just take a beat to talk about where we're coming from. 2024 was a year, to say the least. Somehow we still have 6 weeks to go, but would love to just start by grounding us, Aaron, if you will, on what are the themes you saw in 2024, especially as you were guiding your clients, what were the questions they were asking, what are we coming out of as we think about going into 2025?
I think the number one thing that I saw from all of my clients last year was this sort of conviction drought. We were going through, and I think we're all going through a certain amount of PTSD, even currently, but to recognize the overstimulation of all of the intense, unpredictable changes that were happening in society all throughout the year. So if you think about where we came into 2023, and you think about what the sort of evolution of the year kind of gave to us, what I started to see is that lack of certainty really frees everybody, not in paralysis, but in fear and in confusion. And so a lot of clients were coming to me with questions about how do we deal with being in relentlessly unprecedented times? I can't build a marketing plan. I can't build a comms plan when literally from month to month, I don't know who I'm really speaking to, and more importantly, what they believe. And that was very, very difficult for the type of work that we do at SYLVAIN, because we span, as Brandon alluded to, so many different parts of the communication lifecycle and the product lifecycle that being able to understand where people are at is critical to the type of advice that we're able to give and the type of counsel that we're able to provide as a company. But I think, if there's any sort of light within that, I think that we've all become trained in what it means to be overstimulated. Mm-hmm. And we've all started to, and when I say we, I mean both marketers and consumers. And so even in the past 2 weeks, a lot of folks, as I'm sure in a lot of different social circles, you've heard of people just doing the big turning off all their media, all their news, and just saying, nope, I need to reset. Yeah. A lot of people resetting their algorithms and retraining them to be really mindful of the content they're getting. So consumers continue to be smart. The world was wildly uncertain, and for better and for worse, that uncertainty is definitely continuing right now.
Yeah. I saw just this week, Meta actually announced they're making 2 algorithm changes, both on threads, which will focus more on followers. So you're really choosing where your focus is. And Instagram allows you to hard reset your algorithm. I think this is so interesting coming off of the blue sky takeoff, which allows you to always reset your algorithm. So you're right. People are finding ways now to deal with that influx in such a different way. And it did become the norm. But if we take a moment to say, how is this impacting me? Is this what's good for me? How do I want to consume? It's really interesting to think about how to make change.
Yes.
And that's going to be a whole other thing for marketers, because we can't predict anymore. Speaking of unpredictable, Brandon, you want to talk about AI?
Yeah, I have a question about that too, and it's AI specific. And so you talked about overstimulation. Like, we are used to being in a place where we get so many impulses, so many things pushed to us as consumers. But I want to talk about the marketers for a second. We compete in what we call an attention economy. And that attention economy is usually um, is ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere. And so it's scattershot. We can meet people. AI has created a vacuum where people are now able to get real-time, really personalized information. And marketers are really struggling to navigate this nuance. And there's also that match with some apprehension, match with some trepidation, match with. So, can you talk a little bit about where you foresee AI evolving in marketing and communications? And I'm sure there'll be some follow-up questions, but I'd love to get your general view about how AI places itself in the world of marketing from a marketer's perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this question and how it relates to marketers is kind of a big deal because there was a Salesforce study earlier this year that looked specifically at marketers, and 39% of marketers do not know how to use self-reported, how to use AI responsibly. And it makes sense to the point that we're talking about being in a relentlessly unprecedented time. You know, there's a very clear political and legislative lane, and there's a clearly a technological lane as well. I spent a lot of time advising clients in the tech space, and the bomb that AI has dropped on the tech space is huge. And what workers, especially marketers in the space, have to retrain and relearn and sort of navigate, it's an existential heartbeat. I'll put it that way. It's not an existential threat, but it's a moment of, wait, what am I doing here and what is our business? When I think of the AI conversation, I tend to break it down into three different parts. There is the creative conversation, there's the commercial conversation, and then there's the legal and risk conversation. And because we're marketers, I think the tension and the anxiety, the trepidation, the optimism occasionally that we feel is actually at the center of those three forces. We're kind of pulled back and forth. I think the creative conversation is the easiest one to engage in. That's why whenever anybody sees the Coke ad, holiday is coming, we're able to have think pieces about it immediately, or Dior drops their campaign that's got, that's completely generated from Gen AI. I think all of those things are exciting to talk about and important to talk about, but I think that they leave us in a sort of casual paralysis. When you get those stories over and over again, I think a lot of marketers are left saying, kind of just like, huh, okay, I agree, what do I do? And I think that unfortunately is where we're all at. So I kind of have my own like code that I try to follow with this, and I try to advise other consultancies and other agencies to consider it. I think we have to remember four things. I'm gonna number a lot today, by the way. That's just
I
my
love it. I love numbers.
letting everybody know. I think number one is pay your partners. It seems like it has nothing to do with AI, but the threat that Gen AI in particular has on the economic livelihood of creators who are actually generating the creativity that all these algorithms are sucking up and creating new creativity off of. If we don't continue to support creators and make sure that their pockets are lined and that they are being compensated for their work, the algorithm is very quickly going to start to fall apart. We're either going to see a lot of content that is exactly the same or is incredibly messy. So we need to make sure that that foundation of creativity is solid. And that means pay your vendors on time, pay your partners on time, be good to them. I think the second commitment or commandment that I have is know thy data source. And there's two really important reasons for this. One is that no one wants to end up like Cambridge Analytica. I don't know if anybody remembers that from about 5 years ago, but essentially, if you're spending a lot of time working with data that's been pulled from nefarious places or has been sort of aggregated from sources that are not ones that you or your brand want to be associated with, or ultimately are fundamentally bad for your consumers and people at large, you are part of the problem. And so we have to make sure that we're not falling into that trap. Knowing our data sources, knowing where the content is coming from is critical to that. And then the other piece of that goes back to the creators as well. We need to make sure that when we know the source of the data, when we know where all of these models are pulling the content from, which creators are actually being sort of drafted into this, we're able to give them proper credit and proper awareness. Again, back to the kind of commercial nature of this, where marketers are in for-profit creativity, we have to recognize that those people who are making content and creating content are a part of this economy as well and need to be continued to get work from that. Lastly, when I think of leading marketing teams, I think the biggest thing is training them to seek out skepticism. So when it comes to Gen AI in particular, and I'll kind of get into a story here. I've got team members who are creating a visual language for a brand new beauty convention that was being revived. And the entire concept is about being rebellious against the beauty industry and trying to get all people to feel confident in actively tearing down all of the terrible standards that are keeping people from feeling great in their own skin. When my company is trying to visualize this and trying to inspire what this is going to look like as a visual identity, that a lot of these people do exist, but it's easier and quicker to pull Gen AI images of people who maybe seem askew of the norm and to the left or to the right of what is standard beauty. When we started doing that, I actually asked the team to immediately say, well, how are you prompting? What prompts are you using to get this? What is
Yes.
the stuff that you're putting in to get something out?
Mm.
And the reason I say seek skepticism is because I want teams to seek out the flaws and the questions rather than seeking out the answers through their prompts themselves. It activates our ability to be critical. It activates our ability to actually question what content we're getting back and to be really, really thoughtful and intentional about what we're then going to put down as inadvertently the new beauty standard. There's a
Mm.
real trap there for us that we had to think about. So, keeping that skepticism alive and being skeptical is really important for us because no matter where AI fits into our workflow, coming at it from that skeptical perspective will make sure that the data that we get out still goes through our own algorithm, our own intelligence, our own experience, and the own business problem that we're trying to solve for.
Man, this is amazing. And I think this skepticism is a great transition to talk about transparency and trust. So I'll let Jen dive in.
Yeah. Oh, I actually was thinking about how you said know thy sources. I've been experimenting a little bit with Gen AI. And you do have to question everything. I actually recently learned that if Gen AI doesn't have an actual answer, they'll make it up. And that was crazy to me. And so I have started to think about when to use it, how to use it, and what are those prompts. But specifically in know thy sources, I'm thinking a lot about what's going on in the world and misinformation. We talk in our ICI pledge about living in a post-truth world. And in a world, going back to our earlier conversation around algorithms, it's not always purposeful, but you are being fed, certain things at certain times from certain people. And this is going to continue to be a theme in 2025. And I would just love to know your thoughts on how you would counsel brands or marketers to be thinking about now how to ensure we are driving trust in a post-truth world, how we're driving credibility while maintaining authenticity, and how do we battle this when there is skepticism and there is Gen AI, but at the end of the day, we really need to be thinking about truth and transparency, which is, by the way, the core of impact communications.
Yes. Yes. I think, we've been dealing with this question as well at SYLVAIN of are we living in a post-truth society for my entire time there. So it's been almost 9 years that we've been talking about post-truth. And This is true of all people too, or especially Americans. So I think there's a Washington State study from the Ethical Behavioral Institute. I'll pass it along and maybe it can get distributed. It's a great
Yeah,
study.
we can have Tessa pull it up if she can find it.
Perfect. And it actually called out that 69% of American adults think that marketing is less ethical or at the same level of being ethical as it was 5 years ago. And I call this out because it's not necessarily this question of truth is one that isn't just, I think it comes up a lot in the big greater societal and political questions of the day. But I don't know that, and also in business specifically, but I don't think that marketers often understand that we've sold consumers a raw bill of goods for a long time. And what that means to me is that we need to almost stop thinking about it as a crisis of being in a post-truth world, but really thinking of it as a crisis of control and subjectivity. So marketers are constantly thinking about, how do I push my message out to get it to the ears, eyes, and hearts of X consumer? And for years, we've been disintermediated. Consumers have more control over what content they engage with, what brands they engage with, and how deeply that relationship goes than ever before. We have very little power in this. And what ends up happening is that we end up acting like intellectual interior designers. We're throwing ads and content up and just hoping that maybe as you walk through the room, you'll like what it feels like. And that impulse is a reaction. And I think that we as marketers need to remember our role in this. We need to actually step up and step in and say, wait, what space am I helping people exist in? How is my content helping them with their needs? How is my content helping them do what they need to do? And furthermore, when we think about it at the individual level, I think it's very, very intuitive and it's very easy, but it's very hard when you're talking about brands at scale. So when you start thinking about how do you do that for the collective? How do you do that in a way that's going to impact huge groups of people? How do you do that in a way that's going to unlock shifts in behavior? That's where we get to that crisis of subjectivity. That's where we get to everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a perspective. And as soon as you get out of one person, all those opinions start clashing. So I mean, for me, I think the way that I try to advise clients is if we're going to be in the post-truth era, then we as marketers have to be in the post-promise era. We cannot be constantly promising consumers that the world is going to be different, that the world looks a certain way right now, and that that's the way it is. Consumers don't buy it. They're not buying it from us. And I think we have to be really, really responsible for when and how we speak up if we want to try to own or create a relationship with them. If you want to, sometimes I've had clients come to me and they say, well, I'm advising a number of different CEOs and I'm trying to help them understand the economic benefit to caring about social good. How do I persuade them in that way? How do I push them in that way? And I say, well, first of all, do you believe it yourself? Because your business can only speak it if you believe it. It has to be in your values, has to be something that the leadership team, that everybody is 100% behind. And then second is, if you're going to say it, you've got to speak from your diaphragm. You've got to sing out. You've got to say it all the time and not stop. The important thing about truth, trust, and transparency is not what we say, it's what we do. So ultimately making sure that those actions are clear, direct, and meaningful is what consumers are going to care about, because they care about results, not about promises. So let's make sure that we're changing organizations to deliver, not just preach.
Yeah, I love for you to sort of double click on that social activism piece, because brands are obviously conflicted when it comes to that, because, is it opportunistic? Is it performative? And I love what you said, say it from your soul. If it's authentic, you say it all the time. My question is not about when. I think you addressed that. Like, when do you decide? No, you do it all the time. You are Ben and Jerry's, right? Like, be that all the time. My question is about how do we prepare for the collision? Because now we live in a world where all of our opinions are driving all of our social activism all at the same time, and there are no traffic control people in the street. And brands don't want to have collisions. I mean, so how do you prepare your brand as an advisor to your own CEO, or if you're CEO, to prepare for the inevitable collision that will happen when you stand up and say, this is what I believe in?
Oh, it's very, very well put. I think there is nothing more inauthentic or less interesting than a brand that doesn't have an opinion. No one cares. No one cares. And I'm sorry, the whole point of a lot of our businesses and what marketing is trying to do is help them grow. So to think that a brand can ostrich is an economically failing argument. And I think that that's a part of the conversation that I often have. Then the second thing starts to become, well, I want to speak up, so how? And to your point, how do you prepare for the inevitable collisions? I think it starts internally, number one. Um, you know, it's very important for folks to strike a very equal balance to surfacing all the opportunity that comes from acting in a way and marketing in a way that orients toward values. I think that's critically important, and to internally evangelize for that and helping internal folks who don't sit in marketing to understand what that looks like and how that impacts other business decisions. Um, but I think likewise in preparing for the backlash, it's all about stirring conviction. It's all about making other people understand with their left brain the logic of the argument that's being made, but then with their right brain, just feeling it deep in their soul, feeling and standing behind it, and knowing that they're not going into these battles alone. Um, I think one of the hardest things is that going into 2025, for a lot of the brands that I work with that have an orientation toward impact, I'm reminding them that this is the moment when you're going to earn loyalty. And I think that changes the conversation from being about the short-term argument, the flame war, the bad press cycle, all of that, to get back to how do you create and make sure that your core constituency of consumers is going to stick by you for the long run. And 4 years ago, there were a lot of black squares going up on Instagram after George Floyd was murdered, right? And you had brands all over the place that were saying things, standing in solidarity, whatnot. 4 years later, you've got companies that are cutting their DEI programs altogether, right? And obviously these things are more complicated than just, those 2 points in time. But what it comes down to is that the brands that stuck by what they believed, and the brands that said, we're going to actually fight this battle because it's what we believe in and it's what our consumers value, then you're in the right place. Then it's just a matter of, hey, it's just a very practical question. Do you want to protect your most engaged consumer base? If it's that, then you can't really argue with that if you want to create a durable business that also has the strength to resist short-term fluctuations. I also try to remind people that it's gonna be hard.
Yeah.
It's just going to be hard. And you have to let people know that you're not blind to that as marketing leaders, but also remind them that this is about building a brand is not an overnight exercise. Building a business isn't an overnight exercise. The goal is to create something durable that grows. And if we're keeping the long term in mind, then we do the small battles because it protects our most valuable asset, the most engaged and loyal consumers that we could have.
Can I just double click into the DEI piece? Obviously, we saw a lot of brands. When I was doing my research for this conversation, they said, "Oh, it's not rollbacks; it's evolution." But a lot of brands, Ford, Coors, I think Deere and Company, have transformed or evolved how they're thinking about DEI. And you mentioned, and we know that this is something you and I go way back on, that profit and purpose can coexist.
Mhm.
But do you expect more of the evolution, more of the pullback? I mean, especially in light of the outcome of the US presidency, or what do you see? We know what you would recommend, but how do people on a personal level prepare for that as well?
Yeah, I mean,
That's a tough question, I know. So,
well, no, I'm so glad you asked it, because starting with the personal, I am a Black gay leader of a company,
mhm.
and a company that is built on purpose. Um, this has been a really hard stretch for many
Yeah.
reasons, but this has been a really hard stretch. Um, it is really, really important to me to make sure that, and I start with me because um, I'm I struggle to have optimism for what things are going to look like in the short term, but I'm keeping the long term in mind. And in order to play that game and to remember what my role in it is, I evangelize making sure that all marginalized people, because there are more marginalized people than there are non-marginalized people. I'm not using like capital M, lowercase m. I'm just talking about people who are on the sidelines of a cultural shift, right? Um, those of us who are in positions of authority need to reach out, reach back, and lift up. Now it's more important than ever, because it's going to be much harder over the next 10 years than it is right now. And so making sure that the next generation has as many opportunities as possible, and that all of the leadership ranks and all those decision-making ranks don't get even further thinned out over these next number of years, is absolutely critical. And that's mentorship. That is taking the phone call with the person that drops the line on LinkedIn and it doesn't really look like there's an overlap or anything like that. Having the conversation and then opening a door for them, make a connection, make them go forward. That's really critical for anyone, I think, who's in a marginalized community. I think the other really important thing, I know you asked, what am I seeing? And I'm jumping to what we're doing, but
I'm open to this, and I appreciate your personal perspective. So thank you.
appreciate that. I think staying really attuned and getting very attuned to informal power and persuasion is critical right now. Um, I have advised clients on different forms of DEI initiatives as part of my work in a number of different ways. And I actually spent the past 4 years helping stand up a cross-functional tech organization, a coalition that's intended to help Black devs grow within the tech industry. Um, and we had to have a lot of conversations at the beginning of 2024 with the landscape shifting to say, how do we make sure that we use Google's formal influence and authority to lift up those who can then grow into their own formal authority within these organizations? And rule number one is helping people understand how to navigate those subtleties, how to navigate the unfortunate conversations, the unfortunate moments that are going to pop up without fail. Because it is really important for us to look out for each other. We are not in this alone. None of us are doing anything alone. So teaching about that informal power and authority is really important. I think the other two are pretty straightforward. Um, it's really important to understand what marginalized communities are going through right now. This is not like the 1960s. This is not like the 1980s. This is a very different moment. And I think understanding how your teammates, how your customers, how the smaller slices of your consumer audience pie are going to experience the brands that we're creating and the marketing that we're creating, the experiences that we're creating, is 90% of the battle. It is very easy for unintentional mistakes to cause lasting damage to brands. And in a moment like this, where there is deep lack of a deep sense of questioning to the importance of bringing together different minds, we need to be resilient against that, and we need to make sure that we're pushing back against that. Um, I will say that a lot of clients, I've seen a lot of different DEI organizations within companies change their name, change their standards, change the way that they leaning into inclusion versus speaking about diversity.
Yeah.
And I will say on a softer, more rhetorical note, I think that there's a lot less pushback against the idea of belonging, and creating spaces for different minded people to belong. That's been easier for a lot of larger organizations that I've worked with to, at least from a communication perspective and from budget flow perspective, keep the integrity of what their unit was doing. Now, when it comes to risk and legal assessments, which is what's driving all of this, changes from company to company and industry to industry. And I think that we have to be willing to fight and willing to push for what's right, which is, of course, doing right by people. And it just so happens that doing right by people grows a business.
That's right.
So, data that shows that. So make sure that in this moment, we are not destroying the businesses that we've been trying to build for so long.
Hey, Jen, I want to follow up with one thing, and if it's okay with you, I think we could start asking people to start thinking about if they have questions.
Yeah.
But as they do it, I like to move from the heart to the pocket.
Mm. Mm.
A lot we are running the risk globally of seeing socio-political landscape shift further and further to the right.
Mhm.
And we are running the risk of operating, I mean, even Impact Council and impact related organizations, in a world where people see measurable financial reward for companies and oligarchs and titans and shapers who are placing profit over people.
Mhm.
And I would ask you about the media landscape, but that's been sort of disaggregated with Truth Social and you name it, Twitter. I wouldn't put Twitter in there as well. So what I like to talk to you about is how do we make the ROI case? Because we also are advising and running businesses. And so what things do we need to be looking to measure in order to make the case that we still need to be leading with empathy? We still need to be focused on being sensitive to place, people, matters, priorities that make up an incredible dynamic customer base and employee base. When they look at a world that says people are doing it differently, and they're making billions of dollars doing that. So how should we prepare to respond in that world?
Yeah, I think I love this question because it's fundamentally about when it comes to measurement, impact wins. Like when you look at data, it is going to
Thanks for
support the
coming, everyone. Just kidding.
yeah.
Gonna win.
Well, and I mean, it's very helpful when the data is on your side and when there is such a history and such a just a long tail that makes it easy to make a quantitative case. Whether or not that case gets uptaken is more so where my company ends up coming in, basically. And the reason I'm saying that was not a plug. I'm just being very clear. That was not a plug. It's that that there are a few things. I think one is when you're talking about measurement, it does go back to basics. So really useful measurement requires first defining the goals and then requiring the time horizon. If you control what the goals are that are trying to be achieved and you're really dogged about what those goals are, then it helps the data case be super easy because then it can be unambiguous, then it can be very clear. And there are ways to, as I say it, Trojan horse impact into business decisions in a way that the data will support because that's the way we've set up the goal and that's the time horizon that we've agreed to make sure that we need to track. I think the second thing also is a basic, which is we need to make sure that we're differentiating between positive and negative engagement. NPS is super important. It's a great tool, great to have it. But doing sentiment analysis is very helpful because then you get to play a conversation back through the lens of your audience. And again, saying, well, these conversations are helping us see that not all engagement is good engagement. This is detrimental to us. This is not moving us in a in a direction that we want to go. And more often than not, again, based on the industry that we're in and what we're being asked to do, you're able to make a very strong case that having a stand, making a stand, and having a point of view is actually going to serve everybody better than being vague and being amorphous. The other piece about it is that you have to know and understand what argument we're making internally. Every business has different levers that are going to, and different leadership teams, different coalitions, all have different types of data that are actually going to persuade and move them. And so I often will start engagements with clients by just getting, if it's a brand new relationship, trying to get a sense of, are you more qualitative or quantitative? The answer is always, we're somewhere in the middle. Then I start to get into, okay, let's just talk about different types of anecdata. This has been a phrase that's been thrown around a lot. Anecdata is that fairly scalar, but totally haphazard thing that you overhear at the bar about your brand, or that you see on that Reddit post, or that you see here. And it gets very easy to start to slice and dice different pieces of anecdata and make it brand truth.
Yeah.
And so I like to sort of explore some things in that space to understand, with whom does that impact the most? What type of anecdata tends to persuade them most? And where do they tend to go from with that? Do these folks like to argue? Are these folks risk averse? When you start to get into the psychology of leaders, that's where you start to actually make a case for what sort of measurement you need to do. Because that's when you get to figure out, I don't need to, shotgun blast all of the data that I have at you in the world. I just need to know which 4 pieces of data are actually going to influence you the most to understand the outcome that we want to achieve. And that's the heart of a really good measurement plan. So
That's very helpful.
if you don't start with the basics and you don't lean into their minds, doesn't matter what you're measuring, because the data is in our favor.
Yeah. This is obviously something that has perplexed marketers for years, and I'm sure will continue to be challenging. Just the drive, for us as marketers, of sort of activity level metrics to drive all the way to business impact and make those connections, even at the basic level, is hard. And so when you add in the part about impact communications and doing good, it's just like another layer of a hard solve. I work at Visa. I think as some people on this call know that. And 2 things that have been really interesting for us has been, one, thinking about the metrics and what they mean. We went through an exercise where we literally looked at every single activity level metric and we said, well, what does this mean? Is it important or not? And we really spent time debating on a very little level of what does it mean. The second thing, and Aaron, this goes to what you're saying, but this has become a true obsession of my team, is community engagement and community management, and listening to what people are saying both on and off channel. And obviously, if you can have partners help with that, it's like what you said, what they're saying about you when you overhear them at the bar or the coffee shop, wherever. Like, it's true. There is truth in those conversations when they think no one's listening, and so that's equally as powerful. And I have a CMO who's very tuned in, Aaron, you know him very well, to what communities are saying, and believes that so many themes start within communities and then can explode quickly. And we certainly saw that. I want to get to some questions from the community, and I see we have a couple flowing in, but really quickly, because of course 45 minutes went by in the blink of an eye, I think we should just put on the calendar right now, 1 year from now, November 22nd, 2025, we're going to meet back here.
Yes.
So Tessa, if you could just send the invite now, that'd be great.
Let's go ahead and do it. Lock it in.
Everyone join. What do you think we're going to see, Aaron? And I know you're not fortune teller. Maybe you are, and I don't know, but like, what do you think we're going to see?
Because I'm not a fortune teller, and because I have walked into the mistake of trying to tell the future many times, I don't know. And anyone who tells you that they know in these relentlessly unprecedented times is a liar. They're a charlatan. But I'll at least tell you what I'm hoping for.
I love it.
I want to see a new generation or the next generation of brands that do lead with conviction. and that are fundamentally there to serve the consumer collective. The reason I say the next generation is because we've seen brands like REI, Patagonia. There's so many household names in different spaces that stand out for doing right by people and have had the corporate benefit of doing so. And it's time for some disruption, to use a little bit of a passé term. It's time for more brands to take some stands and to make those moves. And ultimately, when we start to see that crop back up, that's when we're going to start to see investment match brand values. When we're talking about brand values, we're not talking about some abstracted thing that's on a post-it or on a one-sheet slide that like floats around the company every once in a while. It's actually the most aspirational and optimistic version of your customer base, right? So if you invest in those values and you put that money where those where your customers' mouths are, not only are you going to grow in an amazing way, not only is it going to be wildly attention getting, but also you're going to be able to create the case over the long term for why other brands should be doing it. So I want that attention next year. And I think that with all of what could unfold next year, as I said before, this is the time to make some new loyalists. This is the time to build your stable. So that's what I want to see when we get together in November 2025.
Great. See you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see some questions. I want to give a shout out to one of the comments that came in about boomers. You know, we talk about emerging technology, trends, innovation. Boomers rarely come up, and boomers have a lot of money. I mean, they are just incredible to the economy, right? And so I have two. I want to shout out that comment, but then I want to dovetail that into a question. Is that when we start thinking about who will continue to influence trends and who will be the innovator, the true innovators of emerging trends, can you sort of stratify like all of the voices, all of the people and the inputs that will be a part of creating that next wave and these emerging trends that will impact the way we do work?
Yes. I mentioned that we're in a crisis of subjectivity earlier, and yeah, it's a hyperbolic way to say it. It's really the most metastasized version of narrowcasting. We are better at being able to reach smaller slices of people than ever before, and we've gotten very, very effective at it, the marketing industry.
Yes.
What we haven't evolved to is exactly what you're talking about, which is recognizing that young people are not the only cool people.
Mm-mm. I'm pretty
And
cool. I thought I was pretty cool.
I think you're very cool.
throw that out there.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we young. I like this. But no, my point is when we're talking about boomers and we're talking about a lot of the conventions that have been a lot of the channels and a lot of the conventions that are used to reach out to older consumers, it's marketers are generally so lazy. Like boomers are aspirational, they are creative, they are hungry, they're interesting. Why are we producing only these terrible, I'm getting apparently my soapbox just came in, but these terrible daytime ads that are just belittling, denigrating, and presuppose both a lack of engagement and a lack of critical thinking. Because I think that when people think critically and they look at the world around them, they engage with it in a meaningful way. So my bigger point is that I think that where we reach older populations in order to reach their pockets that we want to, it's not just about mimicking the trends and what's going on with the 18 to 40-year-old or 18 to 45 demo. It's actually about spending time with boomers who want to spend, who can spend, and meeting the cool stuff that's going on in their lives and their communities. And I'll tell you, the industries that are starting to feel it and get the most hip to it are for better or for worse, it's retirement communities. And the way that some of the more leading edge retirement communities are starting to talk and are starting to show up is incredibly different than 10 years ago. Incredibly different than 10 years ago. And it doesn't have to just be about retirement, because that's not the only thing that goes on when you are a boomer. So I feel very passionately about the fact that if you respect a consumer, then you put the budget into reaching out to them, and that means spending time with them, and that means playing back the cool parts of their life that actually exist. So I didn't know that that was going to hit me in my spot, but my goodness, I want to talk about that.
So true, though. I feel like every brand today talks about Gen Z as the only thing, the only one, the only place to be. And yeah, that obviously they're an up and coming generation and they're thinking very differently. And we've all talked about the shift of wealth, but yeah, there's a lot of other people from which culture and ideas and creativity can emerge. So I love that. That's amazing. We have like 2 minutes, so maybe we'll pick a question from the chat that's come in. Brandon, I don't know if you have a favorite, otherwise I'm gonna go for it.
Go for it.
Okay, great. So, Aaron, and I'm gonna just pick sort of the first one came in. Anna has asked us, how can nonprofits who have been in the impact space for a while connect with a more of a consumer audience without being preachy and in a way that creates brand loyalty for their own brands as well? Would love to dive into that. And Anna, if there's context to that, or you want to follow up with Aaron afterwards too and talk about how we can help you with that and branding, let us know.
Yeah, this is I nonprofits bear a lot of resemblance to B2B organizations, I find, and I genuinely did not expect that. I've worked with a number of nonprofits over the past 5 years or so, and the main part of the conversation is that B2B brands behave more like consumer brands than ever before. The way that they show up, the way everything from the aesthetic choices that they make, as well as to the tone of their communications, has started to become more casual, has started to become closer to the way that real people speak. Obviously, it's not been a whiplash, but in the past 10 years or so, that's been a big shift. When it comes to nonprofits, I find that being able to embrace that side of the organization, which is usually so close to the surface, helps bring in new partners really quickly. And both corporate partners who might work with you to increase your scale, as well as donors and grantees and other foundations, because there's so much skepticism and nervousness around which nonprofits are legit. And everybody's running to Charity Navigator to see if they've got the right score and figure out, should we donate, should we not? And it always just comes back to, do you believe in what you're doing, and are you a real person? And that's really, really hard to communicate through comms. But when I've seen organizations like Anse Pu Haiti, which is a Haitian relief organization, they've really leaned into that over the past 4 or 5 years or so. I also think that the Kindness Project is another one, which is really interesting, that leans into that sort of transparency and that energy. So it seems intuitive. It is so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
Well, that is.
I can't even thank you enough for this conversation, mostly because I learned a lot. We have these are, of course, in 2025 planning. But for me, the past few weeks have also been challenging as I processed everything and thought about what would impact me, what would impact my friends, my family, my colleagues, and communities with whom I'm not even connected yet. But what today did, not only in this conversation, but seeing the comments and the questions, it actually really gave me a lot of optimism.
Yeah.
You mentioned this earlier, but there are people who are still in this journey and feel the same way as we do. And what you said at the very end of like, do you believe in what you're doing, and are you a real person? And that's what this community is. It's real people who believe in what they're doing, and a small spark can start a big fire. And that's what this group, I think, pushes on every day of how do we show up? How do we provide that? And as we think about 2025 planning and emerging trends, it's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of good in the world, and we can bring that to the organizations with whom we're working, and we can plan for the best, and we'll take whatever comes as well.
We all need to take
Did
a
I leave
deep.
you speechless for the first time ever? Oh my God.
It's incredible. You did, because
Did I just do that?
the most important thing that I believe that we can do right now is take a real deep breath. When I talk about retraining our algorithms or taking a break from news media, it's fine. Everybody can resubscribe when you're ready to. Like, that's okay. The most important thing is that we restore our sense of resilience and that we recognize that we're not in this alone. There are a lot of people who want to spark their fire, who need help sparking their fire, and just a little bit can help get them going, can get you going. So I love what this organization is doing, and I do think that organization is the key word. Let's stay connected, let's stay in conversation, and let's not just stop at planning, let's prioritize action. The world doesn't need more plans, the world needs more action. So let's do it this year. Let's do it.
There's a famous quote in there somewhere with world doesn't.
True.
Thank you so much, Aaron, and thank you all to the participants too for this. I hope this was a rich discussion, and that you walk away with something into your weekend that enriches your life and gives you hope and optimism that impact relations will continue, should continue, and must continue to shape our world. Round of a virtual applause for Aaron and Jen for co-moderating.
And back at you, Brandon. This was just great. Brandon, before everyone jumped on, Brandon encouraged me and Aaron and Tessa and Camila to do something great with our day, and I think we just accomplished it. So now we can not do anything else the rest of the day. Just kidding. Thank you again to everyone. This was wonderful. You should definitely check out impactcommsinstitute.org for upcoming events, subscribe to our agenda, download our guide to learn more about Impact Comms as if this was your first one. I also will encourage you to check out, and Aaron, if you don't mind dropping your SYLVAIN's website in the chat to learn more about how Aaron, who is an Impact Communications partner, can help support you and have other conversations. And finally, if you are interested, please take our pledge. That is so important, and we know that that helps galvanize the group. So that's it. Thank you so much to everyone. Any final words, Aaron or Brandon? Or
be peaceful, be awesome.
Be peaceful, be awesome. Our new sign off.
Love it. Thank you so
you,
much,
everyone.
Bye-bye.